Okay, these were Israelites that joined themselves unto the heathen. This is a key, important understanding in determining what's really going on with this particular story that we're reading here within the book of Mark 7 and 24. Right? They made themselves what? Uncircumcised, and they followed after the customs of the heathen, and more so than that, they did what? What did it say here? They forsook the holy covenant and joined themselves unto the heathen, and they were sold to mischief. So they became Greeks, man. They joined themselves unto the Greeks, so they became Greeks. Now let's get a little proof right now. This is the book of John 7 and 35, and then we're gonna go get some more stories within the book of Maccabees. John 7 and 35. This is why she was being called a Greek, because her forefathers she was living like a Greek. All right, her forefathers had lived like a Greek, like Greeks. Okay, like the Hellenian. Okay, she was living like a heathen, man. She was living like a dog. But when Yahweh appeared on the scene, guess what? Through faith, she was able to access that particular blessing, man. Just like how you had it to where Abraham, through faith, was able to access that particular blessing. Okay, Abraham through faith was able to access that particular blessing. Abraham wasn't circumcised, man. Okay. Now I believe the law of circumcision just came after that, but Abraham wasn't circumcised. He wasn't, his father was I believe his father was all up into the ways of the Canaanites, man. Okay. John 7 and 35, it says, then said the Jews amongst themselves, whither will he go that we should not find him? Will he go unto the dispersed amongst the Gentiles and teach the Gentiles? Why did they say teach the Gentiles? Because them Jakes that was on the scene back then, they joined themselves unto the ways, they joined themselves unto the heathen. Okay, now let me just check what other notes I got here to go into. Right, so this is Hellenization, right? This is an article I pulled off of the internet, and then we're going to go into the book of Maccabees 6. Maccabees. We're going to go into Maccabees, I bet 6 and 20 or something like that. Hellenization was the spread of Greek culture and the assimilation into Greek culture of non-Greek peoples. And as we see with the Israelites, that this was the forcible assimilation. And when you read about the history of Antiochus, the Epiphanes, man, whew, there's a reason why it's called he was that wicked brute, man. There's a reason why, because he did that forcibly onto the Jews. So therefore there was resistance, and then you had a couple of battles, and ultimately the Maccabean family prevailed, and they was able to keep particular customs, right? But guess what? Their sons that came out of them, which later became the Jews that was on the scene when Yahweh said, not all of them was wicked, because you had particular Pharisees that was righteous, but you had a whole multitude of them that was, they would look meticulous on the outside. They was meticulous in the observance of the Sabbath. They was meticulous in the observance of the customs. But inwardly, they was wicked, man. Okay, they was wicked on the inside, man. And they didn't have the faith of Yahweh Hashem outside, of which the scripture talks about how that faith is a gift from Yahweh Hashem outside. That's why, the Most High set Abraham up, because ultimately, he gave him the faith. The Most High had already given Abraham the faith. Put him through the test. Okay, there's the faith, here's the blessing. That's the same thing that happened with a woman. What was the test? She called her a dog. As we're going to see within the scriptures, he called her a dog. And then she exemplified her faith, man. And then he was like, okay, cool. As it said unto you that it's going to be done. And we know the salvation is only unto the Israelites. So what? By proxy, she's going to be one of the children of Israel, man. Hellenization was the spread of Greek culture and the assimilation into the Greek culture of non-Greek people, which included certain ones of the Israelites, as we just read here within First Maccabees. Okay, this is an example of that later. So let me read that. An approach. It was notable. It was a notable trait of the ancient Greek civilization, an approach to other cultures that was not merely invasive or dominant, but transformative. Let's read that statement again. because it was a transformative process. You had to make yourself uncircumcised. There was I believe there's a thing within the history whereby certain individuals will get lambskin, wrap it around their penis to make themselves uncircumcised, man, because they'll be out there within the gyms, right, battling out there within the gladiatoriums naked, right? It wasn't, let's read that again. It says an approach of other cultures was not merely invasive or dominant, but transformative, right? It made them into Gentiles, man. It made them into the what? Into Greeks. Yeah, they were wearing togas. They had their heads shaved bald. Okay, they shaved their face, man. That's like you get Jake right now. He gets a Speedamite woman, an Edomite woman, marries up with that particular woman. He shacks up with her, so to speak, and then his whole voice changes. Okay, now he's out there talking about, you know, you gotta have the steak rare. Okay, he's gonna be out there what? With his face smoother than the baby's ass, man. That's how these Jakes are now. Imagine how they was like out there when the Romans was forcibly forcibly pushing these ideas onto Israel. So it says here, this set an example later followed by the Roman Empire, Christianity, and the British Empire, essentially establishing a framework within which much of the Western history can be discussed. Right. There's a piece of history here that's going to be relevant. We did that. Let's go to here. Let me get this little quick piece of history. Right, so this is Antiochus IV, Epiphanes, surnamed Epiphanes, right? And this is the history that we're going to be reading here within the book of, we've read a little bit of it within the book of Maccabees, okay? So let's accept cookies, and just read a little bit of this. So Antiochus Epiphanes, right, which that term, Epiphanes goes into he was so proud, he was basically trying to call himself the Most High, man. He was saying that he was the Most High manifest. That's what the term Epiphanes goes into. So it says there, a Seleucid king of the Hellenistic Syrian kingdom, who reigned in 175 to 164 BC. As a ruler, he was best known for his encouragement of Greek culture. All right. He was best known for his encouragement of Greek culture. His attempts to suppress Judaism brought on the wars of the Maccabees. Right? Is there something a bit more exhaustive than that? Of course. Right, I'm not going to read the early history. You can read the early history in your own time. Right, the Ephes, this is a whole segment here within this history. I didn't know this was going to be here, but it's beautiful that it's here. But I didn't know it was going to be here. Right, but it says here, Ephes to Hellenize the kingdom, to make them worship the Greek way of life. Again, if you worship the Greek way of life, you ain't going to revolt. That's why dudes is calling themselves African American, man. That's why dudes is talking about let's save America. That's why you got my man Kanye West looking like a damn idiot, basically trying to preserve the American way of life, man. Looking like a whack job. That's why he's out there doing them things. Because what? Because he's preserving the American way of life. It's a self-fulfilling system. That's why that goes back onto the Willie Lynch letter. Right? There's so much things that's involved within this thing of Hellenizing a particular nation. Because why? Right? You got a situation whereby it's a self-fulfilling, self-fueling machine, man. It's a self-fueling machine. You don't have to worry about revolts. You worry about Kanye West revolting and he's going to be what? Against the system? Nah, this nigga's a part of the system, man. Efforts to Hellenize the kingdom. Both economically and socially, he made efforts to strengthen his kingdom. Right? He tried to strengthen it through Hellenizing the people there. To make them worship the Greek way of life. To strengthen his kingdom, inhabited in the main by the Orientals. By fostering Greek cities. Even before he had begun his reign, he had contributed to the building of the Temple of Zeus in Athens and the adornment of the theater. he enlarged Antioch on the Orontes by adding sections of the city named Epiphania after himself. Okay, there he built an aqueduct, a council house, and a marketplace. Right. Let's continue. Antiochus's Hellenizing policies brought him into conflict with the prosperous Oriental temple organization, and particularly with the Jews. Since Antiochus the third reign, the Jews had enjoyed extensive autonomy. Okay, they had enjoyed the ability to govern themselves, and they was governing themselves under what? Underneath the law. You had the high priest and the different things that was happening as attributes to that. Okay. Continuing, he says, they were divided into two parties: the Hasidians, which was Orthodox pious ones, and the Reform party that favored the Hellenism. Right. For financial reasons, Antiochus supported the Reform party, and in return for a considerable sum that was Jason, we're going to read it within the book of Maccabees, the 6th chapter in a second Maccabees, 1:23, I think it is. For a considerable amount of sum, permitted the high priest Jason to build a gymnasium in Jerusalem to introduce the Greek mode of education, educating young, and in 172, for an even bigger tribute, he appointed Melanos in the place of Jason. In 169, however, while Antiochus was campaigning in Egypt, Jason conquered Jerusalem with the exception of the citadel, and murdered many adherents of his rivals Melanos. When Antiochus returned from Egypt in 167, he took Jerusalem by storm and enforced Hellenization. It's a beautiful piece of history there, and I believe most of the accounts can be extracted also from the what's this book called now, the Josephus, and also you can read it up here. You can read about the reign of Antiochus Epiphanes. But he had gone out there. I believe he had to try to take over Egypt from the Ptolemies, and Rome basically said, "Nah, go back home, man. You're doing too much." And so he returned, and then you saw the state of what was happening within Israel, and he did what it says here. And I'm gonna just read that again because it's important, right? And when Antiochus returned from Egypt in 167, he took Jerusalem by storm and enforced its Hellenization. Right? Enforced its Hellenization. That's why this woman was being called a Greek. Now, let's go into the book of Maccabees now, again, and read okay, 2 Maccabees 6:3 is where I want to go to. Right, 2 Maccabees 6 and we can start from 1. 2 Maccabees 6:1. It says, "Not long after, the king sent an old man of Athens to compel the Jews to depart from the laws of their fathers." That's why these Jakes out here, these Israelites, was being called Greeks. Okay, this is the reason, because they had been compelled through force in some instances to reject the ways of their forefathers. Long after, the king sent an old man from Athens to compel the Jews to depart from the laws of their fathers and not to live after the law of the Most High, and to pollute also the temple in Jerusalem, and to call in the temple of Jupiter and in the Garizim of Jupiter, the defender of the strangers, as they did desire that dwell in the place. And it says here, "And the coming in of this mischief was sore and grievous to the people, for the temple was filled with riot and the raveling by the Gentiles, for they dallied with harlots and had to be do with women with circus of the holy places, and besides that they brought in things that were unlawful. The altar also was filled with profane things, and the law was the law was forbidden. The law was forbidden. But neither was it lawful for a man to keep the Sabbath days or the ancient feasts. Remember what it said in the previous segment of Maccabees that I read. It said there was many that were so far therein that they went after these customs. So you had the parties that were split, the parties that was pro-Hellenizing and the party that was against Hellenizing. What do you think was happening when this happened? They was happy, man. They was happy to be Hellenized. So they became what? They became Greeks, man. Okay? The altar was also profaned, and the law was forbidden. Neither was it lawful for a man to keep the Sabbath or the ancient feast, or to profess himself to be a Jew. Woo. Right? This is the key understanding of you read the story of the Syro-Phoenician woman, and you read another story where it says, oh, this person was a Greek and this, that, and the third. You're thinking in your mind it's actually a Greek. Now it says Syro-Phoenician, it also calls her a Canaanite, and it also calls her a Greek. But it was an Israelite woman that was living in that particular land of Canaan, right, underneath the Hellenistic customs, right? She was living like a Hellenian, okay? She was living like a Greek, okay? But she was an Israelite. Just like how you have right now, you got Jakes out there within Africa, living after the ways of the Americans, but they're Israelites. It's exactly the same thing. You got Jakes out there within America, living after the way of the Americans, but they're actually Israelites. And this is why this word is going to be pushed out there, because this word being pushed out there, going back onto the book of Amos, the 9th chapter and the 9th verse, is the sifting process by which the faithful ones was going to come back onto the understanding of Yahweh Shai. Okay? This word going out there has got a particular vibration, and the vibration going out there is the trigger for the faithful ones to come into the understanding of Yahweh Shai, man. That's the trigger point. Let's continue here. It says, I'm just going to read that verse again. 2 Maccabees 6:6. Neither was it lawful for a man to keep the Sabbath days or ancient feasts, or to profess himself to be a Jew or all. And in the day of the king's birth, every month they were set forth in. And in the day of the king's birth, every month they were brought by bitter constraint to eat the sacrifices, and when the feast of Bacchus was kept, the Jews were compelled to go into the procession of Bacchus carrying ivy. Okay, so you go to where you got children and they're seeing all of these things. They don't know no different. How are you? They don't know no different. So they was gonna do what? They was gonna keep that. Okay, they was gonna keep to those customs. They was gonna observe those customs. They was gonna be into it. Okay, so that's it. All right, that's it. So I mean, we can go into that all day, but that's only one little minor point of what I'm trying to do right here. Right. So we need to start building up the picture towards the faith now, right? So we got the historical understanding of why she was being called a Greek, right? So let's go into let's finish Mark 7:24, read Matthew 15 and 22, and then we can go to all the other precepts and start closing out. Okay, so let's go to the book of Mark 7:24. So it says here, the woman was a Greek. Now you understand why she was being called a Greek, man. She was Hellenized. She was an Israelite, but she was underneath she was Hellenized. And you got to remember, the Greeks was ruling all of that area of Coeli, Syria, Israel, all of that. That was part of this Seleucid Empire. So they was controlling all of that. Even though she was in the land of Canaan, that's why it says Syro-Phoenician, or she was called a Canaanite in Matthew. All right, she was an Israelite. So hopefully you get that by now at home. By nation, and she besought him that she would cast forth the devil out of her daughter. But Yahweh Shai said unto her, let the children first eat, right? And first be filled, for it is not meet to take the children's bread and cast it unto the dogs. So now let's just understand that term, cast it onto the dogs, and understand why that term is being used. Okay. Now we understand part of it because now there's two ways of there's two ways of looking at it. One, that's the test of faith, because the response, as you're gonna see within the scriptures, the response that she had given was the exemplification of her faith, and through that faith, her daughter was healed. Okay, and another aspect to look at is also too that the fact that you had it to where these Israelites that was outside of the court, that was outside of the laws, was likened unto dogs, and that's what we're gonna explore a little bit right now. So let's take a look at. I think. Right, I want to get two precepts. Right, the first is in the book of Revelations. The second is the book of Revelations 25. But we're gonna get back to that, and I'm just gonna read a little bit of this story. Okay. I'm hoping. Right. So that becomes relevant a little bit later on, that precepts. Okay, so what we want to go to now is this term, dog. Okay, and the best place I've got it, I think I only got one precept for that. There's a few scriptures for that, but I got one precept for that, and I think that's going to be within the book of Revelations 22.